that of economic ties, and increase cooperation to fight terrorism. But specifically, my proposal sees 5 main goals. They include increased economic productivity, greater access to natural resources, stronger information capacities for proactive terrorism, greater Kazakh defense capabilities, and more transparent communication between the two nations. Now, the first 2 points actually go hand in hand, because my proposal seeks to increase economic productivity and create greater access to natural resources for Kazakhstan and the United States by increasing the transparency between the 2 nations, as well as introducing Kazakhstan to the World Trade Organization. Now, Kazakhstan is the leading producer of uranium in the world, and with it comes rare earth metals, both resources which play a key role in the future of American and Kazakh industry and technology. Now, this proposal would not only allow Kazakhstan to increase production of rare earth metals with American investment and technology, but it would allow the United States to look away from China in regards to rare earth metal access. So let me explain why the importance of rare earth metals is in this proposal. Our technology, which goes from the cars that we drive, to the cell phones that we have in our pockets, to the military defense that the United States uses to defend us, are all dependent upon rare earth metals. But here's a really crazy fact. China owns 97% of the production of rare earth metals. Now, increased transparency and pushing Kazakhstan into the World Trade Organization will allow for American companies to flourish and for Kazakhstan to move away from the post-Soviet bloc and into Western markets. In fact, we find that on June 22nd, we actually found that Kazakhstan was accepted into the World Trade Organization. Now, let's look to terrorism. We find that the growing threat of sectarian violence in Central Asia, along with issues such as autonomy of post-Soviet nations, makes increasing the military capability of Kazakhstan an issue of great concern for not only the United States, but Central Asia as a whole. As the Central Asian Analyst notes in June of this year, that the issue of terrorism has been growing in Central Asia. And while Kazakhstan has not been hit by a major terrorist attack, the threat is consistently growing, which is why my proposal calls for more information to be relayed between the 2 nations and for training to lead NATO Evaluation Level 2. So, to clarify, NATO Evaluation Level 2 is a level in which a nation can join the NATO Response Force. Now, joining the Response Force would have 3 basic benefits for Kazakhstan. They would become stronger and be able to retain their autonomy in the region. They would be able to address direct threats in the form of terrorism. And finally, they would be able to provide quick disaster humanitarian relief to nations in Asia as a whole. Because as Command Sergeant Major General Ronnie Kelly of the United States Army notes in his time with the Kazakh forces, investment into the Kazakhstani military personnel will pay off in the future. Delegates, I yield the remainder of my time.
You've yielded 31 seconds. At this time, the chair will entertain a 4-minute round of non-debatable technical questions on the floor. New York, UN, New York, Massachusetts, Missouri, Kentucky, Michigan, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, South Carolina, Massachusetts, Texas, Maryland, Maine, Oklahoma. Undercurrent will cease. Delegates, proceed.
Mackenzie Smith, Republic of Texas. What current ties do we have with Kazakhstan?
My ties since 1991 is mostly associated with disarmament.
Thank you. Author, next question.
Eric Rumble, Massachusetts. For clarification, has Kazakhstan attempted to join the World Trade Organization?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Has Kazakhstan attempted to join the World Trade?
Yes, they waited for 20
Thank
years.
you. Next question.
Andrew Faulkner from the Republic of Texas. Can you please explain to me this NATO Evaluation 2 level?
Yes.
Briefly.
Okay, so basically it's a level in which Kazakhstan has a quick ability to respond to those 3 issues that I brought up in my own presentation.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you, Sir Chair. My name is Jacob Mendes, and I am from Florida. How many people died during the annexation of Crimea?
I'm not aware of that number.
Thank you. Next question.
The estimate from the Republic of Texas. Currently, how often does the U.S. hold economic trade or commerce talks with Kazakhstan?
We've had a few recently, most recently June 2nd of this year.
Thank you.
Osmelos, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. How exactly do you extract a rare earth metal from a natural element?
You mine it.
Quentin Hubel from the Republic of Texas. Will this support Kazakhstan's effort to become a developed nation?
I'm sorry, Delegate. That question is debatable. Next question.
Cultural Emission Delegation. Well, just to clarify, will you attempt to get Kazakhstan to join NATO?
That would be a goal in the future.
Term, Missouri delegation. Do you happen to name a few of those metals that you explained in the open summation?
The rare earth metals, there's zinc, yttrium, lanthanum, and other few others.
Thank you. Author, next question.
Marina Valian, delegation. Thank you, Mr. Chair. What are the 3 main resources the U.S. trades with Kazakhstan currently?
They're just mainly minerals as well as other infrastructure.
Thank you. Next question.
Is this, on the Republic of Texas, would this help to combat the China and Asia Development Bank?
I'm sorry, that is debatable. Next question.
Mr. Chairman, it's Marshall, New York State delegation. How many countries are part of the World Trade Organization? What are its leaders?
Sorry, I didn't get the last part of your question.
Which are its leaders?
I'm not aware of exactly how many countries are involved.
Thank you. Next question.
Quentin Keller, the Republic of Texas. Has Kazakhstan been elected into the UN Human Rights Council?
It has 3 years ago.
Thank you. Next
Thank you.
question.
Ethan Schaefer, Michigan delegation. Does the United States have an embassy in Kazakhstan?
They do.
Jesse Searles, the Republic of Texas. What other countries have these rare earth metals other than Kazakhstan and China?
South Africa, and not a country, but the moon.
In Edwards, Republic of Texas, what are some of the things we use these rare earth metals for?
All kinds of technology from military
Thank
to
you. Next
cell phones to
question.
cars.
Thank you, Sir. Charlie Answell, New York State delegation. What type of government is currently in place in Kazakhstan?
Presidential republic.
Hi, Sammy Schramm, the Republic of Texas. What products/raw materials do the U.S. and Kazakhstan trade with each other?
Rare earth metals, uranium, as well as agriculture.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you, Sir Chair James Casabon, the Empire State of New York. You said that Kazakhstan has a high supply of uranium. How much uranium does the United States use annually?
I do not have that number, but this proposal is for rare earth
Thank you.
metals.
Next question.
Alexis Wright, South Carolina. What is your plan to strengthen the economic ties while working around their command economy?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question.
What is your plan to strengthen the economic ties while working around their command economy?
I'm sorry, delegate, but that is not a technical question. Next question.
Is there any evidence that Kazakhstan is actively
Yes.
Girls Porter, Massachusetts delegation. In your proposal for action, you stated there would be increased investment in Kazakhstan.
I'm sorry, but the time for non-debatable technical questions has elapsed. At this time, the chair would like to recognize the intent speaker. The chair recognizes Zale of the Model United Nations. Delegate, you are recognized for a 3-minute statement. Your time has begun.
Thank you, Sir Chair. So I stand here before you in supreme opposition.
Delegate, please display your placards to the chamber.
In supreme opposition of this proposal for many reasons. For one, it's not economically feasible. Kazakhstan currently, 75% of chemicals that are exported are uranium and aluminum oxide. They are not high producers of rare earth minerals. Uranium, granted, is important to rare earth minerals, but they're only important to uranium mining, which is the process, a very dangerous process, to actually mine the rare earth minerals. So as long as the U.S. isn't really planning on expanding its rare earth mineral mining system, the uranium is just blatantly unnecessary. Now, not only that, Kazakhstan has an unwieldy amount of bureaucracy. As much as we like to complain about China, currently China's tariffs are between 1 and 15%. Kazakhstan tariffs have been increasing by 40% annually. Since when is this a friendly business model? Okay, and even if you don't believe the economic aspects of that, look at the terrorism. There are pockets of the Taliban, known as the Saudi Laden groups, and they are housed in the capital of Kazakhstan. Not only that, but the Kazakhstan has been known and has publicly announced that they will release Al-Qaeda terrorists to Uzbekistan. What type of terrorist partner is that? And even if this is not enough to sway your opinion, the proposal author stated that this is in America's best values. Since when has American values been one of the worst human rights records in the history of the world? There is no independent judiciary system. There is no freedom of speech. There has been no free election since the 1990s. Okay, in 2005 and in 2006, opposition leaders were murdered. Okay, this is a facade that has been put up by the Russian government to make Kazakhstan more appealing. And this has happened before. Iran, Syria have all been entered by the United States for the sake of securing our foreign affairs, or trying to engage in more international trade. But those are now one of the most volatile nations on earth. Iran, Syria, and Libya. Is that another path that we want to go down? And although the proposal author has stated that this is a mechanism to get Kazakhstan off of Russia, did you know that only a couple of years ago, Kazakhstan signed a triumvirate with Russia and Belarus? This is not in America's best interest, and if we go down this path, it's leading to the problems that have gotten us here in the first place. I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
Thank you. At this time, the chair would like to recognize the pro-intent speaker, Baker of New York. Delegate, you are recognized for a 2-minute statement. Your time has begun.
Thank you, Chair. Colin Baker, New York State Delegation. I'm in strong support of this proposal for several reasons. As far as human rights concerns, I would like to direct you to point number 4, proposal for action. This ensures that we are able to directly relate the increase in protection of human rights to economic productivity. Also, according to President Nair Bayev, but while meeting with a congressman in September 2014, Kazakhstan said they were willing to increase civil and human rights protections along with civil society. Also, if the U.S. does not step in now, other countries such as Russia and China will abuse their power and influence in this area and thus abusing civil rights. As far as economics, voting down this proposal as stated by the proposal author gives China control of 97% of rare earth metals. By strengthening ties with Kazakhstan, this allows the U.S. to gain greater access to these metals while maintaining protection and proper use of them. Also, on June 10th of 2015, the U.S. and Kazakhstan held a joint business forum in Kazakhstan. This allowed for U.S. business to not only expand into Kazakhstan markets, but also into Central Asia, which will give the U.S. greater economic opportunity along with the creation of jobs. Another area which this proposal pertains to is anti-terrorism. The problem is that international politics stop the U.S. from helping countries with lethal aid to defend themselves. This proposal will make Kazakhstan capable of defending itself from future aggression from other countries, especially Russia and China. Also, the STEP Eagle program made in 2002 between most Western countries, including the United States, with Kazakhstan, has strengthened ties between these nations. This allowed us to trade militaristic ideals to help the defense of Kazakhstan. This proves that we have already been in Kazakhstan helping them, and that the Central Asian analyst, the most legitimate source in Central Asia, stated that the United States has been there. Again, as the proposal author stated, reaching NATO Level 2 reaches 3 important benefits to this. Gives them quick response to terrorist attacks, greater ability to protect Kazakh autonomy, and ability to help in natural disasters. And in that, I strongly urge the passage.
Thank you, Delegate, but your time has elapsed. At this time, the floor is now open for con-pro debate. Thank you. The chair would like to recognize a con speaker. Is there a con speaker on the floor? The chair recognizes North Carolina Sowers. Delegate, your time has begun.
Thank you, Chair. I am Delegate Sowers from the great state of North Carolina, and I would like to reserve the right to yield any remaining time.
That is your right.
All right, thank you, Chair. I am standing here in opposition to this bill because it detracts from our national interests and the interests we have expressed in our foreign affairs policy in the last 6 years. President Obama has instituted a shift to focus our foreign policy on the Asian Pacific world. This detracts from that by detracting our new special programs and the new special things that we are deciding for our foreign policy from the Asian Pacific world, from the Ring of Fire. That will be the economic story of the next 100 years, and putting it on another country, Kazakhstan, which does, and Astana does, have economic promise. However, it is not nearly as great as the economic promise proved by the Asian tigers, the biggest economies that will be, foremost in the next century. We should have consistent foreign policy and not jump around everywhere by establishing special relations with a country that we have not expressed interest in with our, biggest foreign policy movements in the last 6 years. In the past, we've had special focuses in Europe, special focuses in the Middle East, while now we have clearly defined our foreign policy for the next 50 years will be focused on our special relations with the Asian Pacific region. And by passing this proposal, we are detracting from that. And now, secondly, I would like to address the point of rare earth metals. Now, I don't know if delegates in here are aware of this. However, Molycorp has opened up a huge rare earth metals development plant in Southern California. And so our rare earth metal dependence is going away more quickly and quickly. This is more than $1 billion investment. Now, rare earth metals are everywhere. They're in the soil underneath us right now. Rare earth metals are a question of development and procurement, not of access. We can access these anywhere. And so having rare earth metal access is not a very compelling reason to establish special relations with the country. I'd like to yield your remaining time to
11 seconds.
Kilo Churros in the Commonwealth of Kentucky Search here. I'd just like to point out that Kazakhstan has a freedom score of 63.3, which places it at 69th on the list of freest economies, which isn't atrocious, but it isn't.
I'm sorry, delegate, but your time has lapsed. At this time, the chair would like to recognize the first pro speaker. Is there a pro speaker on the floor? The chair recognizes Stinson, Alabama. Delegate, please make haste.
Stinson, Alabama, I reserve the right to yield the remainder of my time to Fitzpatrick of Alabama.
That is your right as soon as he is up at the podium with you and displaying his placard. And until he does that, your time is running and you cannot begin. That is your right, you may proceed.
I would just like to point out something the previous delegate stated. These are rare earth metals, emphasis on rare. Kazakhstan would help us protect these interests, and if we're going to look to human rights violations, the United States is currently opening diplomatic relations with Cuba as we speak, a government known for many human rights violations, but we have to protect those interests. Also, our allies in the Middle East are known for human rights violations. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, all of these countries have dirty hands, and honestly, we can't go into a nation without getting into someone with dirty hands, and with that, I yield the remainder of my time to Lewis Fitzpatrick of Alabama.
70 seconds.
Thank you, Delegate President County of Alabama. The three biggest foreign policy crises of our time are 1, Chinese aggression and expansionism, 2, Russian aggression and expansionism, and 3, terrorism. This proposal elegantly solves all of these problems by placing us in a region that is essentially located between Russia and China and the Middle East, all these hot sources of problems for foreign policy. And I think this is an extremely good proposal because obviously Kazakhstan has the same interest that we do because they are being squeezed by Russian aggressionism on one side and Chinese aggressionism on the other side, and by terrorism from the Middle East rising up from the south. So obviously they are actually pursuing the same goals that we are. And yes, this is foreign policy. That means it is this is about compromise. Obviously, we're not going to find another America overseas that has perfect civil rights and perfect human rights abuses. And so obviously we need to compromise. And also on the rare earth metals, it's extremely important that we undermine China's influence in this market because they have a complete monopoly right now, which means that we have to go to them to produce our own military equipment, which we will surely be using to combat them in a war that is surely coming, considering that they are literally building islands on international territory, and that we explicitly told them not to do. They are literally building military bases on islands that belong to Vietnam. So there is a clear conflict between China and the U.S. arising, and I urge all of you to not be skeptical that China will do this, because they are literally building military bases.
Your time has elapsed. At this time, the chair would like to recognize a con speaker. Is there a con speaker on the floor? The chair recognizes Ibrahim, Pennsylvania.
I'd like to reserve the right of the delegation. I'd like to reserve the right to yield the rest of my time to Delegate Schneider, Pennsylvania.
That is your right.
Thank you, sir. Chair.
Delegate, please display your placard.
I'd like to remind all those that are present currently that when we went into the Middle East to make allies and get their oil, may I add, that we ended up starting a war. What is there to say that if we go into Central Asia, that to get their resources and these rare earth materials, as the author stated, that we won't do the same, start another war. And with that, I would like to yield the rest of my time to Delegate Schneider.
You've yielded a minute and a half.
Greg Schneider, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So Kazakhstan is actually a one-party government, which I think is despicable for the United States to ally itself with. I understand that the Middle East is responsible for very many wrong things, but that does not validate our alliance with Kazakhstan. An alliance with Kazakhstan would be the United States endorsing their actions, and that is deplorable. So the issue with China actually, and the United States, our availability for resources is actually the same. It's just that China's environmental regulations lack so much that they're able to outproduce the United States government. So that's a problem we actually need to fix at home. Taking advantage of the situation in China is irrelevant. And also with uranium, uranium is a basic element. Uranium is uranium and nothing else. Just like the other rare earth elements, uranium is plentiful in the United States. It just comes down to our regulations are much stricter than Kazakhstan. So for these reasons, I would urge everyone to fail this proposal. Thank you. I yield my time to the chair.
And the chair thanks you. At this time, we will now move into a round of pro debate. The chair seeks to recognize a pro speaker. Is there a pro speaker on the floor? The chair recognizes the delegate from the Model United Nations in the very, very back. And please make haste. Your time has begun.
Hans came with the UN. Thank you, Sir Chair. I reserve my right to limit my time to pleader from New Jersey.
That is your right.
Ladies and gentlemen, in response to a few previous statements that were brought up, the Republic of Taiwan is a democratic state, and yet we refuse to recognize them. So please, should we base the fact that we are not recognizing a democracy as a valid point? To me, that seems completely illogical. Secondly, this proposal is purely on a trade basis. I see no point in bringing up a potential war based on things that we've done in the Middle East, when in the Middle East, our main purpose was trying to develop democracy in countries that didn't want our help in changing their way of life. We are not trying to change the Kazakhstani way of life. We are trying to form trade agreements. So please, consider that when you consider this proposal. I yield the remainder of my time to plead from New Jersey.
New Jersey. Thank you, Sir Chair, and previous speakers. So what this represents is a crucial shift in our foreign policy, right? And what we're finally doing as a country is...
I'm sorry, delegate. Please display your placard. It needs to be visible to the chamber. Thank you.
So instead of what we're doing, instead of like invading other countries and trying to impose our values through them, we're actually trying to improve the world through economic development and partnership with these countries. So I reject the notion that we shouldn't interact with Kazakhstan just because they don't have the same values as us currently. Because if you want to see democracy spread across the world and economic progress spread across the world, maybe we should actually work with these countries instead of bombing them until they basically have no infrastructure or ability to operate themselves. Also, there's a point that like Kazakhstan is really closely allied to Russia, and that was true a few years ago. But with the failure of the Russian economic union due to their recent currency collapse, Kazakhstan has become very disenchanted with Russia. So this presents a perfect opportunity for us to make gains in the region, right? And there's another point that, like at this point, all Kazakhstan has is uranium. And I'll bring you back to the point of economic development. By investing in Kazakhstan and actually working with them, we can get to the point where rare earth metals become a viable export from this nation into the United States, and we can take advantage of that from an economic standpoint. So basically, what this does is gives us a loop.
I'm sorry, delegate, but your time has elapsed. At this time, the chair would like to recognize a con speaker. Is there a con speaker on the floor? The chair recognizes Roselar, Wisconsin.
Delegate Roselar, Wisconsin delegation. Thank you, Sir Chair. I reserve my right to yield any remaining time to Ramos from Florida.
That is your right.
Alrighty. This proposal leaves quite a bad taste in my mouth, kind of like the food here.
Delegate, please keep comments germane to the issue at hand.
This is very similar to this sort of thing that occurred in England when they took over India, or Belgium when they took over the Congo. We are going to exploit these countries for their natural resources, and that's not okay. The countries in the past, and what we're claiming to do is help infrastructure, help security, and help the political system. But what in actuality this is proposing is we go in, we take their natural resources, and then we leave. And we can see from the Belgian Congo that it leaves them in a deplorable state. Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time to Delegate Ramos.
A minute and 5 seconds.
Thank you, Sir Chair. My name is Jacob Ramos, and I am from Florida. To correct a few
previous assumptions. According to foreignpolicy.com, rare earth metals are not actually really all that rare. According to them, are rare earth metals really that rare? Not really. The term rare earth is an archaic one dating back to the elements discovered by a Swedish army lieutenant in 1787. In fact, most, though not all, of the 15 or 16, depending on which scientist you're talking to, elements are fairly common. So we probably do have these elements in America, just the extraction techniques are what we don't have and what we need to develop in our own country. Also, I'd like to remind everybody of the crisis in Ukraine. When Ukraine attempted to increase their ties with the EU and other Western organizations, Russia sent in its forces to annex Crimea and cited a known crisis for the world, which, might I remind you all, was also the cause of the Malaysian airline crash that was shot down by separatist groups backed by Russia that killed 298 people. Also, Putin has ordered 40 new intercontinental ballistic missiles to be developed by the end of this year. Kazakhstan was already a part of the Soviet Union in previous years, so not only would this increase further ties to Kazakhstan, it would also push ourselves away from Russia and incite more violence in that area.
But your time has elapsed.
Thanks, Chair.
This time the chair would like to recognize a pro speaker. Is there a pro speaker on the floor? The chair recognizes Minden, Arizona.
Natasha Moon, Arizona delegation. Thank you, Sir Chair. I'd like to reserve the right to yield my time to Topcar from Colorado.
When you display your placard, that is your right.
Thank you. All right. There are a couple of important things in this proposal that the opposition has been unable to address properly. Many believe that this is just an economic proposal, trade deal, but it's also going to be important because we are strengthening our position in the Middle Eastern region. We see that right now our main ally in the Middle Eastern region is Israel. But unfortunately, with the Iranian nuclear deal progressing, that means that we're straining our relationship with Israel. That means we need to find a new ally in the Middle Eastern region, and Kazakhstan is the perfect fit because they have this kind of relationship in the Middle East where they could do real good and allowing for real change to be occurring in this Middle Eastern region. But we also see again with this human rights violations that we will be allowing for increased transparency between the two nations in regards to human rights with the incentives of increased trade and business between the two nations. That's extremely important. We do trade with other nations that have human rights abuses, but we're going to be allowing for transparency in this nation. But then also when we talk about these rare earth metals, right now the United States does have these rare earth metals, and it's important that we try and put into place a system to allow for the extraction of this. But until we do, we need a source that isn't China, because right now we have extreme trade imbalance with China, and we need to find new sources so that we're not finally going to be inferior to them economically, which is why we need to use Kazakhstan in the meantime. But then also, Kazakhstan in the past had turned to Russia because the United States was not there for them. That's why it's extremely important that we be there now and try to promote this democratic nation. And for, I would like to yield the rest of my time to Topcar from Colorado.
16 seconds.
Bonnie Topcar from Colorado. Now let's make it very clear, we already have relations with Kazakhstan. This is to intensify it further. We've had relations since 1991, and the United States has helped Kazakhstan get rid of their nuclear stockpiles. In addition, Kazakhstan has helped the United States during the Afghan war.
I'm sorry, Dylan, your time has elapsed.
Thank you, Chair.
At this time, the chair would like to recognize the final con speaker on this proposal. The chair recognizes Wilson, Delaware.
Jared Wilson, Delaware delegation. Thank you, Sir Chair. I reserve my right to make a motion, or not, sorry, I reserve my right to yield my time to the delegate and a Barabu from Delaware.
That is your right.
Thank you. So, I would just urge everyone to think about this proposal in a broader international sense. Almost every historical instance of the United States entering this region has failed on an egregious level. On the most basic level, this proposal has the United States getting involved to forward our own beliefs and our own international desires. And so what would follow, as we have seen before, would be economic subjugation, environmental deterioration, and destabilization in Kazakhstan at the fault of the United States. What's more, this proposal sets the United States as a clearly adversarial stance to China and Russia in an international environment where the smallest of political maneuvering could result in the rapid deterioration of the relations of the major world powers. With that, I yield the remainder of my time to the delegate from Delaware.
1 minute and 10 seconds.
The Los Angeles Delaware delegation, thank you, Sir Chair. I stand in firm opposition of this proposal because of human rights. In this proposal, strengthening economic ties takes precedence over furthering an international human rights agenda. Kazakhstan's poor human rights record continued to deteriorate in 2013, with authorities cracking down on free speech through the misuse of overly broad laws. Authorities maintain strict controls on freedom of assembly and religion, and despite flawed trials, courts upheld prison sentences of those convicted. Torture remains commonplace, and no real strides are taken to improve any of these violations. The last time we decided to ignore a country's awful human rights violations because of potential economic opportunity was Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and the United